Sometimes the person everyone underestimates carries the blood of warriors. Sometimes the quiet new girl who stumbles on her first day holds secrets that could silence an entire room of critics. And sometimes the laughter stops the moment people realize they're not just looking at another awkward teenager. They're looking at the daughter of America's most elite fighting force. What started as cruel mockery on a high school track would soon become a lesson in respect, legacy, and the unbreakable bond between a father's training and a daughter's determination. This is the story of Emma Rodriguez, whose first run changed everything. Not just for her, but for everyone who thought they knew what strength looked like. Emma Rodriguez clutched her worn-out backpack straps as she walked through the main entrance of Riverside High School. The California sun beat down on her shoulders, but it wasn't the heat that made her palms sweaty. Moving to a new school halfway through junior year felt like jumping into deep water without knowing how to swim. The hallways buzzed with the familiar chaos of morning rush hour. Students clustered around lockers, sharing weekend stories and inside jokes that Emma would never understand. She pulled her schedule from her pocket for the 10th time, double-checking room numbers, and tried to memorize the layout her guidance counselor had hastily explained during yesterday's brief tour. At her old school in San Diego, Emma had been invisible in the best possible way. She knew which teachers to avoid on Mondays, which bathroom stalls had working locks, and exactly where to sit in the cafeteria to avoid both the popular crowd and the kids who threw food. Starting over meant learning all these unwritten rules again, and Emma had never been good at making friends quickly. Her father's latest deployment had ended 3 months ago, bringing the family to this small coastal town north of Los Angeles. Master Chief Petty Officer Miguel Rodriguez had tried to make the transition sound exciting during their family meeting. New opportunities, he'd said. Fresh start for everyone. But Emma saw through his optimistic tone to the guilt underneath. Military families moved often, but this transition felt different. Harder. The first period was American history with Mrs. Patterson, a silver-haired woman who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. Emma slipped into an empty seat near the back, hoping to blend into the beige walls and motivational posters. Mrs. Patterson introduced her to the class with the standard new student announcement, causing 20 pairs of eyes to turn and evaluate her before quickly losing interest. During lunch, Emma sat alone at a corner table, picking at a peanut butter sandwich while observing the social dynamics around her. The popular kids claimed the center tables, their laughter carrying across the cafeteria like a soundtrack. Athletes congregated near the windows, still wearing practice jerseys for morning workouts. Theater kids animated their conversations with dramatic gestures, while the academic achievers quietly discussed homework assignments. Emma didn't fit neatly into any of these categories. Back in San Diego, she'd been decent at cross-country running, but not exceptional enough to be considered a star athlete. Her grades were solid, but not outstanding. She enjoyed reading, but wasn't theatrical. Most days, she felt like she existed in the spaces between defined groups, never quite belonging anywhere. After lunch, Emma's next class was physical education with Coach Martinez, a stocky man with a whistle permanently attached to his neck. The girls' locker room smelled like disinfectant and teenage anxiety. Emma changed quickly into her PE clothes, grateful that her mother had thought to pack workout gear in their essential items box. Coach Martinez announced that today's activity would be fitness assessments. The class would rotate through various stations, testing flexibility, strength, and endurance. Emma's stomach tightened. At her previous school, these assessments had always been her least favorite part of PE. She was fit enough from running, but she'd never been naturally athletic or competitive. The first station was push-ups. Emma watched as other students took their turns, some struggling to complete 10 proper repetitions, while others knocked out 25 without breaking a sweat. When her turn came, she managed 15 clean push-ups before her arms began shaking. Respectable, but nothing that would draw attention. Next came sit-ups, followed by flexibility measurements. Emma performed adequately at each station, earning neither praise nor criticism from Coach Martinez. She began to relax, thinking she might make it through the assessment without incident. Then, Coach Martinez announced the final station, the quarter-mile run. The track circled the football field, its red surface marked with white lines that seemed to stretch endlessly under the afternoon sun. Emma joined the group of girls gathered at the starting line, trying to calm her nerves. Running had always been her strongest physical activity, but first-day jitters could make even familiar activities feel foreign. "All right, ladies," Coach Martinez called out, clipboard in hand. "This isn't a race against each other. I want to see your individual best effort. For laps around the track, I'll be timing everyone, so pace yourselves accordingly." Emma positioned herself toward the back of the group. She'd learned from experience that starting too aggressively often led to burning out before the finish line. Her father had taught her about pacing during their weekend runs around the base. Steady and controlled, he'd always said, "Save the sprint for when it matters most." The whistle pierced the air, and the group took off. Emma settled into what felt like a comfortable rhythm, letting faster runners pull ahead while maintaining her position ahead of the slower students. The first lap felt smooth, her breathing controlled, and even. She could hear her father's voice in her head, reminding her to keep her shoulders relaxed and her stride efficient. By the second lap, the group had spread out significantly. The naturally fast runners had pulled away from the pack, while others had already begun walking. Emma found herself in the middle of the group, running alongside a girl named Jessica, who seemed to be maintaining a similar pace. "You run much before this?" Jessica asked between breaths. "Some," Emma replied, not wanting to get into details about her cross-country experience or the countless training runs with her father. As they rounded the turn into the third lap, Emma began to feel the familiar burn in her legs. This was the point where mental strength became as important as physical conditioning. She focused on her breathing, counting steps to distract herself from the discomfort building in her muscles. But something felt different today. Maybe it was the stress of starting a new school, or the fact that she'd barely slept the night before, or the reality that her usual pre-run routine had been disrupted by moving boxes and unfamiliar surroundings. Whatever the cause, Emma's coordination began to falter as fatigue set in. It happened during the final turn of the third lap. Emma's right foot caught slightly on the track surface, causing her to stumble forward. She managed to catch herself with her hands, avoiding a complete fall, but the momentum sent her into an awkward sideways roll that landed her on the grass beside the track. The incident lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds felt like an eternity. Emma could hear laughter from some of the students who had finished their runs and were watching from the sidelines. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she quickly got back to her feet, brushing grass stains from her shorts and t-shirt. "You okay?" Jessica had stopped running and jogged back to check on her. "Yeah, I'm fine," Emma said, though her pride was definitely bruised. She could see Coach Martinez approaching with a concerned expression, but what bothered her more were the snickers and whispered comments from the group of girls who had witnessed her stumble. "Smooth move, new girl," someone called out, followed by more laughter. Emma wanted to disappear. She wanted to be back in her old school where nobody knew her as the girl who had tripped during her first PE assessment. Instead, she found herself standing on an unfamiliar track, covered in grass stains, with her face burning red from embarrassment. Coach Martinez reached her side. "Everything all right, Rodriguez?" "Yes, sir. Just lost my footing for a second. These things happen. You want to finish the lap or call it done for today?" Emma looked at the final quarter lap remaining. Every instinct told her to take the easy way out, to accept the coach's offer and spare herself further potential embarrassment. But somewhere in the back of her mind, she could hear her father's voice from their training runs. "Rodriguez women don't quit when things get tough." "I'll finish," she said quietly. The laughter had died down, but Emma could still feel eyes on her as she resumed running. Her rhythm felt off now, and her confidence had been shaken. She completed the final lap at a slower pace than she was capable of, crossing the finish line with a time that was respectable but far from impressive. As the class gathered their belongings and headed toward the locker room, Emma overheard fragments of conversation about her stumble. Most students had already moved on to other topics, but a small group seemed determined to milk the moment for entertainment value. Did you see the new girl eat dirt on the track? Maybe she's more of a chess club type than a runner. I don't know why she would try to keep running after that fall. I would have just walked to the nurse's office. Emma pretended not to hear the comments as she changed back into her regular clothes. She'd dealt with mean kids before, but something about being the new student made their words sting more than usual. Back in San Diego, she'd had friends who would have defended her or at least helped her laugh off an embarrassing moment. Here, she was completely alone. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of introductions to new teachers and attempts to navigate unfamiliar hallways. Emma's mind kept drifting back to the track, replaying the stumble and wondering how long it would take for people to forget about it. In her experience, high school students had short memories for most things, but embarrassing moments involving new kids had a way of sticking around longer than anyone wanted. Walking to the parking lot after school, Emma spotted her mother's Honda Civic in the pickup line. Maria Rodriguez had taken a half day from her new job at the local hospital to handle Emma's first-day logistics. As Emma slid into the passenger seat, she tried to arrange her expression into something resembling normal. "How was the first day, Mija?" her mother asked, pulling away from the curb. "Fine," Emma replied automatically. "Just the usual new school stuff." Her mother glanced over with a knowing look that mothers develop after years of parenting. "Just fine? Nothing specific happened." Emma considered telling her about the track incident, but decided against it. Her parents had enough stress dealing with their own new job situations and getting the household settled. The last thing they needed was to worry about her social adjustment problems. "Really, Mom, it was fine. The teacher seemed nice, and I think I like my classes." This wasn't entirely untrue. Her teachers had been welcoming, and the coursework looked manageable. It was the social aspect of school that felt overwhelming, but Emma had learned that parents couldn't fix those kinds of problems anyway. That evening during dinner, Emma's father asked about her day. Miguel Rodriguez had spent the afternoon at the nearby naval base, processing paperwork for his new assignment. Despite being officially stationed on shore duty, he still carried himself with the precise posture and alert expression that came from 20 years as a Navy SEAL. "Tell me about the physical education program," he said, cutting into his chicken. "Is there a cross-country team you might be interested in joining?" Emma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I don't know yet. Today was just fitness assessments." "How did those go?" "Okay, I guess. Did the usual stuff, push-ups, sit-ups, running." Her father nodded approvingly. "Good to stay in shape. We should start doing our weekend runs again once I figure out the best routes around here." Emma had mixed feelings about resuming their training routine. On one hand, running with her father had always been special time together, and she'd missed it during the chaos of moving. On the other hand, today's track experience had shaken her confidence more than she wanted to admit. Later that night, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling of her new bedroom. Boxes still lined the walls, waiting to be unpacked and organized. Everything felt temporary and unsettled, including her sense of belonging at Riverside High School. She thought about the laughter following her stumble and about the whispered comments in the locker room. Tomorrow she would have to face those same students again, and the day after that, and every day for the rest of junior year and all of senior year. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. Emma had always been resilient when it came to military family challenges. She learned to pack quickly, say goodbye to friends, and adapt to new bases and new schools. But something about this transition felt different. Maybe it was because she was older now, more aware of social dynamics, and more sensitive to judgment from peers. Or maybe it was because this move had been particularly abrupt, giving her less time to mentally prepare. Whatever the reason, Emma found herself questioning things she'd never doubted before. Was she actually a decent runner, or had she just been lucky at her previous school? Did she have what it took to make friends in a new place, or was she destined to remain an outsider? Would her father be disappointed if he knew how badly her first PE assessment had gone? These questions circled through her mind as she finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that tomorrow would bring challenges that would test not just her running ability, but everything her father had taught her about strength, perseverance, and what it truly meant to be a Rodriguez. Emma's second day at Riverside High School began with the kind of gray marine layer that made Southern California mornings feel deceptively cool. She'd spent most of the night tossing and turning, replaying yesterday's track stumble in her mind. By morning, she convinced herself that most people had probably already forgotten about the incident. High school students moved on quickly from other people's embarrassing moments, didn't they? Her optimism lasted exactly until she walked into first-period American history. As she took her seat near the back of the classroom, she heard a familiar voice from yesterday's PE class. "Hey, isn't that the girl who face-planted on the track yesterday?" The comment came from Madison Walsh, a blonde junior who seemed to command attention wherever she went. Emma had noticed her during lunch, holding court at one of the center tables, surrounded by other students who laughed at everything she said. Emma kept her eyes focused on her notebook, pretending to be absorbed in organizing her pens and highlighters. Mrs. Patterson hadn't arrived yet, giving students a few more minutes of unstructured social time that Emma was beginning to dread. "I heard she used to run cross-country at her old school," another girl added. "Makes it even more embarrassing, right? Like, if you're supposed to be a runner, how do you trip on a flat track?" Emma's face grew warm, but she continued arranging her supplies with deliberate focus. She'd learned from experience that reacting to mean comments only encouraged more of them. The best strategy was usually to remain invisible until people found someone else to talk about. Unfortunately, Madison Walsh didn't seem interested in moving on to other topics. "Maybe she was nervous about running in front of actual athletes," Madison continued, her voice carrying clearly across the classroom. "Some people look athletic until they actually have to perform, you know?" This comment stung more than Emma expected. She might not have been the fastest runner at her previous school, but she consistently finished in the top half of cross-country meets and had earned a spot on the varsity team as a sophomore. Her stumble yesterday had been an isolated incident, not a reflection of her overall athletic ability. Mrs. Patterson entered the classroom at that moment, saving Emma from having to endure more speculation about her running credentials. As the teacher launched into a lesson about World War II, Emma tried to focus on taking notes, but her mind kept wandering to Madison's comments. The morning passed slowly, with Emma hyper-aware of every glance and whispered conversation around her. She couldn't tell if students were actually talking about her or if her own embarrassment was making her paranoid. Either way, she felt like she was walking through school under a spotlight that highlighted all her flaws and mistakes. Lunch provided a temporary refuge. Emma found the same corner table from yesterday and pulled out a book to discourage anyone from attempting conversation. She discovered that reading during lunch was an effective way to appear busy and unapproachable without seeming actively antisocial. Her peaceful isolation was interrupted when Jessica, the girl who had checked on her during yesterday's run, approached her table carrying a lunch tray. "Mind if I sit here?" Jessica asked. "The other tables are pretty packed." Emma glanced around the cafeteria, noticing several empty seats at various tables, but nodded anyway. She was grateful for any friendly interaction, even if it might be motivated by pity rather than genuine interest. "How are you feeling after yesterday?" Jessica asked, settling into her chair. "That was a pretty hard fall." "I'm fine," Emma replied automatically. "Just lost my balance for a second. It happens to everyone. I once tripped walking up the stairs to the gym and sprained my ankle. Way more embarrassing than stumbling during a run." Emma appreciated Jessica's attempt to make her feel better, but she wasn't convinced that everyone shared such a forgiving attitude. She'd heard enough comments throughout the morning to know that her stumble had become a topic of conversation among certain groups of students. "Are you planning to try out for cross-country?" Jessica continued. "Coach Williams is pretty cool, and the team could use more runners. We lost a lot of seniors last year." Emma hadn't given much thought to joining the cross-country team. At her previous school, she'd enjoyed the sport and the camaraderie of team training, but the idea of trying out at Riverside High felt intimidating after yesterday's performance. "I don't know," Emma said honestly, still getting settled with everything else. "Well, if you change your mind, tryouts are next month. I'm thinking about joining too, but I'm nervous about the training intensity. I heard Coach Williams makes everyone run hills 3 times a week. The conversation drifted to other topics, and Emma found herself relaxing slightly. Jessica seemed genuinely nice, without any hidden agenda or mean-spirited curiosity about Emma's background. Maybe there were potential friends at this school after all. Unfortunately, Emma's improved mood didn't survive the transition to PE class. As she changed into her workout clothes, she could hear Madison Walsh's voice echoing from across the locker room. "I still can't believe yesterday," Madison was saying to her group of friends. "I mean, we weren't even running fast. It was just a quarter-mile assessment, and she still managed to wipe out. Maybe she's one of those people who looks athletic, but isn't actually coordinated," another girl responded. "You know the type, they have the right gear and talk about sports, but when it comes to actually performing, they fall apart." Emma finished tying her shoes with more force than necessary, trying to channel her frustration into something productive. She wanted to march over to Madison's group and defend herself, to explain that her stumble had been an isolated incident and didn't represent her actual athletic ability. But she also knew that engaging would only escalate the situation and potentially make things worse. Coach Martinez gathered the class on the gym floor, announcing that today's activity would be team sports. Emma's heart sank. Individual activities like running were challenging enough, but team sports meant having to rely on other people and potentially letting them down with poor performance. "We're playing volleyball today," Coach Martinez explained, gesturing toward the nets that had been set up across the gym. "I'll divide you into teams, and we'll rotate every 15 minutes so everyone gets a chance to play with different groups." Emma found herself assigned to a team with Madison Walsh, 2 other popular girls named Chloe and Brianna, and a quiet student named Lisa who seemed as uncomfortable with the situation as Emma felt. As they huddled together to discuss strategy, Emma could sense the other girl's skepticism about her athletic contributions. "Okay, let's be realistic about positions," Madison said, taking charge of the conversation. "Chloe, you're our best spiker, so you take front center. Brianna, you're good at serving, so back right. I'll play front right for blocks and quick attacks." Emma waited to be assigned a position, but Madison continued talking as if she wasn't there. "Lisa, you could take back center for passing." And Madison paused, looking directly at Emma with barely concealed disdain. "New girl, you can take back left. Try not to trip over your own feet." The comment sparked laughter from Chloe and Brianna, though Lisa looked uncomfortable with the obvious slight. Emma bit back her first response, which would have involved some choice words about Madison's attitude. Instead, she nodded and moved to her assigned position, determined to prove that yesterday's stumble hadn't been representative of her overall athletic ability. The first few minutes of the game went smoothly. Emma successfully passed several serves and even managed a decent spike that earned a point for her team. She began to relax, thinking that maybe she could redeem herself through solid volleyball performance. But volleyball was never Emma's strongest sport. She'd played recreational volleyball at youth programs on various military bases, but her experience was limited compared to students who had played organized school volleyball for years. As the game progressed and the pace intensified, Emma found herself struggling to keep up with the more experienced players. The critical moment came during a particularly competitive rally. The opposing team sent a high, arcing shot toward the back corner where Emma was positioned. She moved to intercept the ball, but misjudged its trajectory slightly. Instead of making clean contact for a controlled pass, the ball deflected off her forearms at an awkward angle, sending it directly into the net. "Seriously?" Madison exploded, throwing her hands up in frustration. "That was an easy pass. My little sister could have handled that shot." Emma felt her face burning with embarrassment and anger. The shot hadn't been particularly easy. It had required precise timing and positioning that she simply hadn't executed correctly. Madison's public criticism was both unfair and deliberately humiliating. "Sorry," Emma muttered, more out of automatic politeness than genuine remorse. "Sorry doesn't help us win," Madison shot back. "Maybe you should stick to activities that don't require coordination." Chloe and Brianna giggled at Madison's comment, while Lisa looked increasingly uncomfortable with the hostile dynamic developing on their team. Emma could see students from other courts glancing over, drawn by Madison's loud complaints. Coach Martinez approached their court. "Everything okay over here, ladies?" "Just working through some teamwork challenges," Madison replied sweetly, her tone completely different when addressing an adult. "You know how it is with mixed skill levels." Emma wanted to defend herself, to explain that she was perfectly capable of playing volleyball and that Madison's criticism was unnecessarily harsh. But she also didn't want to create drama or force Coach Martinez to mediate a conflict between students. So she remained silent, letting Madison's characterization stand unchallenged. The remainder of PE class passed in a haze of mounting frustration. Emma's volleyball performance deteriorated as her confidence crumbled under Madison's constant criticism. Every mistake was met with dramatic sighs and pointed comments about some people not being ready for team sports. By the time class ended, Emma felt completely demoralized. Walking toward the locker room, Emma overheard Madison talking to her friends about the volleyball game. "I don't understand why Coach Martinez doesn't separate the athletes from the wannabes," Madison was saying. "It's not fair to the rest of us when we have to carry dead weight." "Maybe she'll get better with practice," Lisa suggested quietly. Madison snorted. "Did you see her yesterday? She can't even run without falling down. Adding a ball and a net just makes it worse." Emma changed clothes as quickly as possible, desperate to escape the locker room before Madison's commentary continued. She'd dealt with mean girls before, but something about Madison's particular brand of cruelty felt especially targeted and personal. The walk home from school gave Emma time to process the day's events. 2 days at Riverside High School, and she'd already established a reputation as the clumsy new girl who couldn't handle basic athletic activities. The worst part was that this reputation wasn't entirely fair. Her stumble during the quarter-mile run had been an isolated incident, and her volleyball struggles were more about inexperience than lack of coordination. Emma's mother was working late at the hospital, so the house was empty when she arrived home. She went straight to her room and closed the door, needing space to think without having to maintain a cheerful facade for her parents. Sitting on her bed, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, Emma felt overwhelmed by the challenge of starting over at a new school. At her previous school in San Diego, she'd had established friendships and a known place within the social hierarchy. She'd never been popular, but she'd been accepted and respected by her peers. Here at Riverside High, she was starting from scratch, and her first impressions had been disastrous. Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled through social media posts from friends at her old school. They were sharing photos from cross-country practice, making plans for weekend activities, and generally living the life she'd left behind. She felt a sharp pang of homesickness and regret about the move. Around 6 o'clock, Emma heard her father's car in the driveway. Miguel Rodriguez had finished his first week at the new base and was probably eager to hear how his daughter was adjusting to her new school. Emma dreaded the conversation, knowing that her father would immediately pick up on her mood and start asking probing questions. "Emma, I'm home," her father called from downstairs. "Coming, Dad," she replied, taking a deep breath and mentally preparing to present an optimistic version of her day. She found her father in the kitchen, still wearing his military uniform and sorting through mail that had been forwarded from their previous address. He looked up when she entered, his expression immediately shifting to concern as he registered her subdued demeanor. "Rough day?" he asked directly. Emma had learned that trying to hide things from her father was generally pointless. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had given him finely tuned instincts for detecting when people weren't being entirely truthful. "Just adjusting to everything," she said, which was technically accurate while avoiding specific details about Madison Walsh's harassment. "Want to talk about it?" Emma considered her options. She could tell her father about the volleyball incident and Madison's cruel comments, but she worried that his protective instincts might lead him to contact the school or take other actions that would make her social situation worse. Military parents sometimes had difficulty understanding the complex social dynamics of high school, and Their well-intentioned interventions could backfire spectacularly. "It's nothing I can't handle," Emma said finally. "Just typical new school stuff." Her father studied her face for a long moment, clearly sensing that she wasn't sharing the full story. But he also seemed to recognize that pushing for details might not be the best approach. "You know what might help?" he said eventually. "We could go for a run this evening. I found a nice route that follows the coast for about 3 miles. Good views, fresh air, and some father-daughter time." Emma's first instinct was to decline. Her confidence in her running ability had been shaken by yesterday's stumble and Madison's subsequent comments. The idea of potentially struggling or embarrassing herself in front of her father felt overwhelming. But she also knew that running with her father had always been therapeutic in the past. Their weekend runs in San Diego had provided some of her favorite memories from the previous year, combining physical activity with meaningful conversation and shared goals. "Okay," she agreed. "Let me change clothes." As Emma headed upstairs to get ready, she wondered if returning to running might help restore some of her confidence. Maybe what she needed wasn't to avoid physical activities, but to reconnect with the one sport where she'd always felt capable and strong. Little did she know that tomorrow would bring a challenge that would test not just her running ability, but everything her father had taught her about resilience, determination, and what it truly meant to never give up. Madison Walsh had been watching Emma Rodriguez for 2 weeks now, and she didn't like what she was seeing. The new girl who had stumbled embarrassingly during her first PE assessment was starting to carry herself differently. She walked through the hallways with more confidence, participated more actively in class discussions, and seemed less affected by the whispered comments that Madison had been carefully orchestrating. This shift in Emma's demeanor was problematic for Madison, who had built her social status on maintaining clear hierarchies within their class. Popular students like herself belonged at the top, while awkward newcomers were supposed to remain grateful for any acceptance they received. Emma's growing confidence threatened to disrupt this carefully constructed social order. Madison had established her position as the unofficial leader of the junior class through a combination of charisma, strategic friendships, and a willingness to publicly humiliate anyone who challenged her authority. She perfected the art of cutting remarks disguised as helpful observations, and she surrounded herself with followers who reinforced her judgments about who deserved respect and who didn't. The fact that Emma was beginning to ignore Madison's criticism felt like a direct challenge to her social power. Even worse, Madison had noticed other students starting to warm up to Emma during group projects and lunch conversations. If this trend continued, Emma might actually develop a positive reputation at Riverside High School, which would undermine everything Madison had been trying to accomplish. Sitting at her usual center table during lunch, Madison surveyed the cafeteria with the calculating gaze of a general planning a military campaign. She needed to reestablish Emma's position as an outsider before the new girl gained too much social momentum. "Have you guys noticed how cocky the new girl is getting?" Madison asked her lunch companions, keeping her voice just loud enough to carry to nearby tables. Chloe Peters, Madison's most loyal follower, immediately picked up the cue. "Totally. Like, just because she hasn't completely embarrassed herself lately doesn't mean she's actually athletic. Right?" Madison agreed. One decent week doesn't erase the fact that she face-planted during a simple quarter-mile run. Some people have short memories. Brianna Williams, the third member of Madison's inner circle, glanced nervously toward Emma's table where she sat reading a book and eating lunch alone. "Maybe she's actually gotten better?" Brianna suggested tentatively. "I mean, people can improve with practice." Madison shot Brianna a sharp look that immediately silenced any further charitable observations about Emma's potential athletic development. "Please," Madison scoffed. "Athletic ability isn't something you can fake for very long. When push comes to shove, people reveal their true capabilities." This comment planted the seed of an idea that would grow into Madison's most elaborate plan yet for publicly humiliating Emma Rodriguez. The opportunity Madison had been waiting for presented itself the following Monday when Coach Martinez announced that PE classes would be participating in a school-wide fitness challenge. Each student would be timed running a full mile on the track, with results posted publicly to encourage friendly competition between different PE periods. Madison's eyes lit up as Coach Martinez explained the details. A public, timed running event was exactly the kind of high-pressure situation where Emma's true athletic limitations would be exposed for everyone to see. Even better, the results would be posted on a bulletin board in the main hallway, creating a permanent record of who belonged in which athletic tier. "When is this fitness challenge happening?" Madison asked, raising her hand with feigned enthusiasm. "This Friday," Coach Martinez replied. "Each PE period will run their mile during their regular class time, and we'll compile all the results over the weekend." Madison spent the rest of the week laying the groundwork for Emma's public humiliation. She made strategic comments to students in other PE periods, building anticipation for Friday's results, and establishing expectations about who would perform well and who would struggle. "I heard the new girl thinks she's some kind of runner," Madison mentioned to a group of sophomores. "It'll be interesting to see how she does in an actual timed event." "Didn't she fall down during her first week?" one of the sophomores asked. "Exactly," Madison confirmed. "But apparently she's been telling people that was just a fluke. Friday will prove whether she can actually back up all her confidence." Madison also made sure to build up her own expected performance, mentioning her previous track experience and her consistent training routine. She'd run competitively during her freshman and sophomore years before deciding that track required too much time commitment, but she maintained decent fitness through recreational running and other sports. By Thursday evening, word had spread throughout the junior class that Friday's mile run would be a showdown between Madison Walsh and the new girl who thought she could compete with established athletes. Madison was confident that Emma would crumble under this kind of public pressure, especially since their confrontation would take place in front of an audience. What Madison didn't know was that Emma had been training consistently with her father for 2 weeks, developing both her physical conditioning and her mental toughness. Every evening run had included practice with stress inoculation techniques, breathing exercises, and visualization of successful performance under pressure. Emma had also begun to understand the dynamics of Madison's social manipulation. Instead of feeling isolated and defensive, she'd started recognizing Madison's behavior as a deliberate strategy designed to maintain social dominance through intimidation. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made running feel effortless. Emma woke up feeling calm and prepared, going through her usual breakfast routine while mentally rehearsing the visualization techniques her father had taught her. "Big day today?" her father asked, noticing Emma's focused demeanor over breakfast. "We're doing time miles in PE," Emma explained. "The whole school is participating, and results get posted publicly." Miguel Rodriguez recognized the significance of this event immediately. Public performance assessments were exactly the kind of high-pressure situation where his daughter's new mental training would be tested. "How are you feeling about it?" he asked. "Ready," Emma replied, and she meant it. 2 weeks of consistent training had built her confidence to levels she hadn't experienced since leaving her previous school. "Remember your breathing techniques if you start feeling nervous," her father advised. "And trust your preparation. You've put in the work." Emma arrived at school with a sense of calm determination that carried her through her morning classes. She could sense increased attention from other students, and she overheard several conversations about the upcoming mile runs, but none of this external pressure affected her focus. During lunch, Jessica approached Emma's table with obvious excitement. "Are you nervous about the mile run?" Jessica asked, sliding into the seat across from Emma. "Not really," Emma replied honestly. "I've been training pretty consistently, so I feel prepared." "Madison Walsh has been talking about it all week," Jessica continued. "She keeps making comments about how this will separate the real athletes from the pretenders." Emma felt a familiar flicker of annoyance at Madison's predictable behavior, but she applied the breathing technique her father had taught her and felt her stress level immediately decrease. "Madison can say whatever she wants," Emma responded calmly. I'm just going to focus on running my own race. This mature response surprised Jessica, who had expected Emma to be more rattled by Madison's psychological warfare. When PE period finally arrived, Emma could feel the elevated energy in the girls' locker room. Students were discussing strategy, sharing nervous excitement, and speculating about who would post the fastest times. Madison Walsh held court near her usual locker, surrounded by her usual followers and making confident predictions about her expected performance. "I'm aiming for under 7 minutes," Madison announced loud enough for most of the locker room to hear. "That should be fast enough to beat anyone in our class." Emma continued getting ready without responding to Madison's implicit challenge. She learned from her father that engaging in pre-competition trash talk usually served to increase pressure rather than improve performance. Coach Martinez gathered the class on the track, explaining the logistics of the time-mile run. Students would start in small groups to avoid overcrowding, with the fastest expected runners going in the final group to create excitement for spectators. "Walsh, Rodriguez, Chun, and Thompson, you're in the final group," Coach Martinez announced, consulting his clipboard. Emma felt a moment of surprise at being included with the fastest runners, but then realized that Coach Martinez had probably based his groupings on students' previous athletic experience rather than their recent PE performance. Madison Walsh looked less pleased about sharing the spotlight group with Emma, but she quickly recovered and used the selection as another opportunity for psychological manipulation. "Guess we'll see if the new girl can actually keep up with real runners," Madison said, stretching her hamstrings with exaggerated confidence. Emma applied her breathing technique and focused on her own warm-up routine, blocking out Madison's commentary and the growing crowd of spectators who had gathered to watch the final group run. As the earlier groups completed their miles, Emma paid attention to the times being announced. Most students were finishing between 8 and 10 minutes, with a few faster runners coming in around 7.5 minutes. Madison's stated goal of under 7 minutes was ambitious, but achievable for someone with her track background. When the final group was called to the starting line, Emma felt completely calm and ready. 2 weeks of mental training had prepared her for exactly this situation, a high-pressure performance with Madison Walsh trying to psyche her out in front of an audience. "Remember, this is a mile, not a sprint," Coach Martinez instructed. "Pace yourselves accordingly." Emma positioned herself slightly behind the other 3 runners, planning to let them set the initial pace while she focused on running her own race according to the strategy she and her father had developed. Madison Walsh took a position at the front of the small group, clearly intending to lead from the start and control the race's tempo. She looked back at Emma with a confident smirk that seemed to say, "Let's see what you're really made of." Emma met Madison's gaze steadily, feeling no need to respond with trash talk or intimidating gestures. She was here to run the best mile she was capable of, regardless of what Madison Walsh or anyone else chose to do. Coach Martinez raised a stopwatch. "Runners ready?" Emma took a deep breath, using the 4-count pattern her father had taught her. "Set." Emma visualized herself running smoothly and confidently for 4 complete laps. The whistle pierced the afternoon air, and the race began. Madison Walsh immediately took the lead, setting a pace that was slightly faster than Emma would have chosen for the opening quarter mile. The other 2 runners, Alice Chun and Jennifer Thompson, settled in a 2nd and 3rd position respectively, with Emma bringing up the rear of the small group. Emma ignored the position dynamics and focused on maintaining the pace that felt sustainable for a full mile. Her father had taught her that races were won through intelligent pacing rather than early position, and she trusted her training over her competitive instincts. The first quarter mile passed smoothly, with Emma feeling relaxed and controlled despite the faster-than-planned pace. She could hear Madison's breathing becoming slightly labored, suggesting that the aggressive early pace might not be sustainable. As they entered the second quarter mile, Emma began to feel the rhythm that her father had taught her to recognize, the sweet spot where her breathing, stride, and mental focus aligned perfectly. This was the feeling she'd been chasing during all their training runs, and Finding it during a high-pressure race felt like validation of everything they practiced. Madison Walsh was still leading, but Emma could see signs that the early pace was taking its toll. Madison's form was becoming slightly less efficient, and she was working harder to maintain speed than the effort should have required. Emma, meanwhile, felt like she was just getting warmed up. 2 weeks of consistent training with her father had built her cardiovascular fitness to levels she'd never achieved before, and her mental preparation had taught her to stay calm and focused even while pushing physical limits. As they approached the halfway point of the race, Emma realized that everything was about to change.